Thank you for joining the August 29th, 2019 VOLTHA call. Just a reminder to everyone that VOLTHA meetings are public and recorded, and we do post these to YouTube after the meeting. So be mindful of that during any presentations and discussions today. With that, we'll take a quick look at today's agenda. So I think you probably saw the email I sent last night. There were still some issues with the VPN connectivity that are hindering us doing the Redfish importer demo. So let me see, I don't see Dinesh on the bridge at the moment, but as of last night, this was still not resolved. So this likely will be pushed out another week. We'll see if we can get that sorted out for next week, unless I hear differently from him during the call today. And then we also wanted to kind of do a quick little sync up on where we are with the survey results for possible meeting times for a VOLTHA community meetup around the ONF Connect timeframe. And so we'll have Sean do a quick recap of that and some discussion. Then the third topic we have today, hopefully everyone saw the email on VOLTHA Discuss. There is a link to it here. With the question from Scott on KPI and event format. So it's a question related to JSON or Protobuf encoding for those events. And so we thought we'd allocate some time on this call today for discussion of that topic as well. So that's what our agenda looks like today. Again, likely the demo is going to be pushed out. And then next Tuesday, we're going to have a demo from Scott related to some things he's been doing with VOLTHA logging. And then I put a placeholder on here. Let me see. Gilles, I think from our last discussion, you were going to do some follow-up with Suchitra related to the automation framework proposal that was presented on the stabilization brigade, and just doing some comparisons and planning there. Do you think that it would be useful to have a follow-up discussion on this call after you have that discussion with Suchitra?
Possibly. It depends on the way it goes.
Yeah, okay.
What it looks like is that there's been some overlap in the work that, so I want to suggest to Suchitra, where we can help next. We're only committed till the end of September or mid-September, I think.
Okay.
So far, so I don't know how. Yeah, so that doesn't leave us much time, but we'll see what we can help with.
Okay, thank you. So I put this on here just as a question, so I'll keep it there a little bit longer, and if we want to schedule something in, we'll just pull it into a time slot.
Okay.
I think that's it. So thank you for that feedback. That's it for the quick recap of things today. And let me see. Sean, are you on the audio bridge? Sean Ying?
I am.
Okay, so I think we'll be going right into the recap of the survey results. That'll be our first topic today. Is there anything you want to pull up on screen, or just a verbal discussion of?
I have the. I tried to not to talk, but I guess I have to.
Sorry.
No. But can I have the presentation right?
Yes.
Can everybody see this?
Yes. I
currently have 23 responses, and I think so. I asked whether we, the Monday morning, Monday afternoon. I think I will assume most of you have seen this one. So the Tuesday afternoon, that one has a 4-hour slot. I think we have 12 people. Either and then Monday afternoon they're actually pretty high too, and then the right now the highest overlap is on the Thursday 7 o'clock, basically breakfast time. So, so Thursday, and then equally on the Tuesday, Wednesday, and then the Friday. So these are the results. I think most likely we'll have. So most likely will be on the. What is this? The 16th is the Thursday morning, 2-hour slot. Okay, so I think I just want to provide an update here. If you have not, if you're coming to vote ONF Connect and you have not submitted this, please please do that. So I will maybe sometime next week we'll send out the couple of the final suggestions, and then or I just the top 2 or something like that. I'll send it out. These are the topics that people said they would like to talk about. It only came from 10. Among the 23, there's 10 suggestions. There's bio migration software stack for the GPON. ASF VOLT 64 stabilization testing, stabilization. The status of stabilization brigade, Tiger Team MVP. If the member here is not aware, there's a CBA project has a Tiger Team meeting. So we define what is something we must have by the end of this year. So if that's something, I guess this is my proposal here. That's why I mentioned the Tiger Team, since I'm involved on that one. Anyway. And GPON support for VOLTHA, that GPON, and so right now VOLTHA is all XGS PON, so people want to understand the GPON support, stabilization, open design questions, that's regarding to the Tiger Team requirement, and then VOLTHA code development and stabilization work for VOLTHA roadmap, and then this one is much, I think stabilization and 2.x probably on 2.x is probably the most common topic people would like to talk about. Introduction networking, technically present, could give brief update on so I'll take in all these consideration, and then we can also set up an agenda on the next week, the email I send out. But again, I would like to welcome everybody to, respond to this survey. If you have missed the link, let me know, then I will send out the link again. Julie, back. Is there any question people have regarding to this? Okay. Thank you.
All right, I'll take the screen back. Thank you, Sean. And hopefully you're seeing the agenda again. Okay. And our next topic then is going to be with Scott. So Scott, did you want to just verbally discuss it, or do you want me to give you presentation rights? Any preference?
Yeah, I don't really have any slides, so I was thinking we'd just verbally discuss the issue.
All right.
So the issue that's come up, it's up there on screen. Some people have pointed out, as they've been working with KPIs in VOLTHA 2.x, that they're output in binary format, and this is perhaps a little more work to decode these things since they're in binary, protobuf encoded, rather than plain ordinary JSON. It's more work for integration, perhaps, with northbound systems, as well as more work for development, since it's a little bit more difficult to for a human just to look at output and see if the output, for example, in Kafka Cat is what you're expecting. So it's been proposed occasionally by people that maybe we should be outputting in just plain ordinary JSON that is supported by a multitude of languages and a multitude of tools, and can be decoded by a person just looking at the output instead of binary encoded protobuf. So I kind of wanted to open up a discussion on that. revisit the decision to go with binary encoded protobuf, and see if people still feel the same way that led to that initial decision, or if there's been any reconsideration. So I do want to clarify that the scope of this is only things that are exported northbound out of VOLTHA. Doesn't apply to things that are used internally within VOLTHA. It's just integration externally that this has come up. So that's what I wanted to open up on. You will see down in my my reply to the thread that David did point out that there is a way to decode some raw encoded protobuf by piping it from Kafka Cat to Proto-C. A disadvantage with that is that you do lose the field names. You just have a bunch of field numbers. But there may be, there are probably ways for us to work around that if we had the protobuf definitions on hand that we could also feed into protobuf. And it may also be the case that some of these northbound tools are starting to integrate binary encoded protobuf. I really haven't looked into it, but there's speculation that this is either already available in some tools or may be coming. So it may be that others are adopting this. It's worth looking into. So that's what I wanted to discuss. So opening the floor for discussion.
Is there any concern with the size of those events? Because I remember somebody mentioning about ONAP moving to gRPC protobuf encoded messages because of the size of the JSON messages. Is there any issue there, or is it it's not relevant in this case?
I'm not aware of any point we've run into a problem that the size was too big, though that certainly is the case that the size of JSON messages are going to be larger than protobuf encoded messages, just because the JSON messages will have full field names and stuff like that in them, delimiters and such.
Okay, so do we expect to have the library that all those processes that are sending events, will there be a library that you're going to use and just output JSON from the get-go, or they will output protobuf and then there will be a separate library that will take the protobuf and put them as JSON?
Yeah, so those are there's two sort of options we have. We could switch to just outputting JSON to start with, or we could introduce a component someplace that would be a proxy that would read the binary encoded protobuf, convert it to JSON, and perhaps push the JSON back out to the very same Kafka bus that the binary encoded protobuf was on, or push it out to a different Kafka bus. It does seem like, if we did want to eventually have JSON, that if we're going from structured data in the first place to protobuf and then to JSON via proxy, that we've introduced unnecessary translations, and that ultimately performance would be capped by having to do all these translations anyhow. Mm-hmm. So I would kind of favor the solution of picking either one or the other and sticking with it. Either we feel the justification of performance, both in time and size, justifies the binary encoded, or we feel that the flexibility in JSON is more important. Pick one or the other and stick with it rather than try to support both at the same time. That would kind of be my thought on that.
Do we have any targeted northbound clients today, and which format do they consume?
So the Kafka topic exporter, I think, would be one, and we've written it, so I assume that we could modify it to do whatever we want. We've also got
that's internal code. So
yeah, that's internal. So we wrote that. We can make it we can make it work with the Protobuf encoded formats. As far as other things that could take Kafka directly, I think Elastic Stack, we're using that, but we're using that for logging, which we're not actually doing logging over Kafka in 2.x yet. So we've got flexibility to choose there. Prometheus, I think, is insulated via the Kafka topic exporter. So I don't know that we need support built directly into Prometheus.
Is there an adaptation for oh, sorry, go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, one thing that's Sean. One thing is, if my understanding about some of these, is the northbound of these will go into the DCA in the ONAP, for example, right? So I think the transport of the ONAP DCA, I thought it's JSON based, it's not Protobuf based at this point, or the VAS collector, right? So there will be a VAS collector in between. I think the William from AT&T Foundry has developed that VAS collector. What do we know what the VAS collector currently is collecting from? Is that a JSON file or is it Protobuf binaries, encoded binary? What I'm saying is, are there any dependency, right? So we do know there's a VAS collector, and we do know some, at least for AT&T, we're looking at the DCAE in the northbound, in the ONAP and ecom space. So will this direction affecting the northbound implementation?
Does the VES collector directly take Kafka? I knew at one point it was a REST interface. Does it directly consume Kafka?
No, I think my exposure on the DCA is the JSON over the RESTful interface.
Right, so something's going to already have to change Kafka into REST, and so there's already a proprietary component there. So, this code's going to have to be written. So, saying that it's giving you JSON versus Protobuf, I think that's kind of a small issue because you're going to have to write code anyway to convert from Kafka to JSON, or Kafka to REST.
Williams, is that William? Okay, test something. He can talk because VES.
Oh, he says it does get JSON off Kafka. Okay.
So David, I think you've looked into this a little bit more than I have with existing tools. Is this Protobuf encoded Kafka, is that something primarily that we've spun ourselves, or are there other open source projects adopting that approach? Do you know?
I don't know. I mean, I think it was, Kenny mentioned there was an Elastic adapter that did Kafka, Protobuf over Kafka, which hints to me at least we're not alone here. Other people are doing this, otherwise someone wouldn't have done that. So, the question in my mind based on that is, it seems like Protobuf is becoming the new information encoding for inner program or inner process exchange. Is it at a point where it's adopted enough that it makes sense to stay there, or are we entering a period where it's transitional, and we'll eventually get where everybody's using Protobuf, but in the transition something else might be easier, like staying with JSON, but then it means in 6 months then the things might have changed and Protobuf might be the way. To be honest, those type of questions right now lead me to the point that we want to keep our options open more than just choose one and go for it. Because I'm real concerned that if we go with JSON, 6 months down the line, it's going to be obvious that everybody's doing Protobuf and JSON is going to be slower performance. And we're already doing Protobuf internally for Exchange.
So perhaps writing a proxy is not a bad idea if we expect the proxy to only have a limited lifespan while we wait for tools to come along that do adopt the binary encoded protobuf directly.
That's kind of where my mind is sitting right now, and I know there's overhead around that.
But at the same time, we're not necessarily that focused on the performance implications of that overhead right now. We're more in the getting it all working phase, and we can factor that overhead out later.
Well, yeah, I think we should always be concerned about performance at every phase, but you know, it depends who we're with the VES that AT&T is looking for northbound. Performance might be an issue. Again, I don't know the volume and frequency of data we're talking about, really, if it's going to be an issue or not.
If we have a library that does subscribing and publishing, and any component that is writing to it, they just write their data, and that library takes care of putting it in Kafka or Protos, and we can swap it in and out, then it shouldn't matter, right? My question is really like, suppose we get a new event type introduced, like, are we better off using Proto or JSON in this case?
It depends on the model, I guess. If the events can be handled in a generic way,
Mm-hmm.
then JSON would say that at least the consumer could process it. He could, if the new event type required special processing, it really doesn't matter because there's going to have to be code change no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what. But if the consumer is handling events generically, like, hey, what's type of event? Here's a type. Here's a timestamp. Then adding a new type may not affect the consumer if it's in JSON. Where in Protobuf it might, because the Protobuf format changed.
Yeah, because Protobuf, when it's supposed to be backward compatible in the sense of if there's a new type that gets added, it's a new type, new field number. So
Right.
it will just be ignored if the processing is not looking at this new type.
Right.
I mean, well, okay, so I got on the call. So, for example, the VES agent, when it processes JSON and sends it to the VES in app, it does actually have to open up the message and map them to the correct format. So it's not a simple transfer. So it would have to do that rather than Protobuf or JSON.
So yes, if it's not a direct transfer, then yeah, a new event type, regardless of JSON or Protobuf, means work there. Is there any? How do I want to say this? Can we kick this can down the road? If no one is screaming for JSON right now, can we say, let's use what we have now until the actual use case comes up where someone says, you guys, I can't do this without JSON?
So I think the one thing we do need now is to come up with some developer tools to help the developers, and that may be just finding the right sequence of commands to pipe together with Kafka Cat that produces a human readable output, or it may mean crafting some tool that does all this together if that sequence of commands is for some reason doesn't already exist. I am receptive to developers looking at this and saying, I'm trying to publish this. How do I verify that what came out of it is what I expected to be published?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm leaning towards if we have a library that all those event producers are using, and the subscribers of those events are all using as well. So I would say like it's we can use the same library and have a wrap on it to mimic Kafka Cat. This way, that same code is being experimented by developers and by the system producing those and consuming those events.
Yeah, I think that's one thing we need to look into is I mean, obviously we have the producer library because we're producing the events. We should look into and see what we have for the subscriber library and what languages it's available in. One would assume because we have both Python and OLT adapters, and these things both for the core to adapter bus, they both speak protobuf. Binary encoded protobuf over Kafka, that the subscriber library must exist. So maybe a first step is to find it, see to what extent it's portable and exists in both languages that people want to use, and throw together a simple command line interface that looks like Kafka Cat to it. It doesn't seem like that should be a high bar to be able to put that tool together.
Yeah, I think regardless if we decide JSON or Protobuf northbound, we're going to want that tool just to watch inter-process communication.
So let's maybe I will create a JIRA story to create that tool.
If Kafka can't, if an existing tool chain works, that might, that would be preferable than writing our own tool, in my opinion. If Kafka Cat can get the right options so that we get the field names as well as the values.
Yeah, so either find the combination of things that produces the tool already, or write it, whichever is the shortest path to success on that. I agree, we shouldn't write something if it already exists.
Yeah.
Well,
so
to that point, there already are Kafka tools out there that many test organizations may already be using that kind of become ineffective. So now you got to use proprietary tools in order to decode what's going on in there. So Kafka is a very standard thing, and there may be many test organizations and things that have plenty of Kafka tools in the way they do things. So now we're going to make them potentially go off and implement more things, proprietary tooling, in order to be able to do their testing that they've been already doing with Kafka previously.
Yeah, that's a good point. Do we have anyone who works on testing here that could speak to anything that you use?
I know that's true in AT&T's testing organizations, because there's other products that have used Kafka, and there are other testing, I mean, we have other products that are testing Kafka quite extensively. So I know that's true for AT&T.
Okay, I'm confused. Testing Kafka. You mean looking at the messages on the Kafka bus?
Yes. Using testing tools, going through testing scenarios, and monitoring the Kafka bus for the expected results that should be coming out of the Kafka messages coming out of the bus. Just using some standard off-the-shelf Kafka tools. Now we're going to have to put the secret decoder ring inside of those tools. Whereas I think the binary encoding is not being used a lot, at least in the products that AT&T has been testing that use Kafka. But I'm not saying it's not becoming more used, but it's just something that is an additional thing that you can't. There may be tools out there that organizations are using to monitor Kafka that kind of become obsolete.
Yeah, my comment there is that is unavoidable with VOLTHA if those testing tools or those testing organizations are going to try to monitor the traffic between the core and the adapter, for example, because that's not the traffic that we're ever going to put a JSON. That's always going to be Protobuf. So as a testing organization, potentially going to want to monitor that anyway. So I don't think they can get around this.
I mean, in general, the testing organization is monitoring the things that's going up out of the box. We're not generally monitoring the communication buses inside the box, but yeah, I take that point.
As I said, if we get to a point where whether it's a testing organization or someone comes to us and says, we can't do this, or the bar just got really high, then I think we can revisit this. But if there's an existing tool chain, I kind of think it makes sense to see if this is where if we can do it with what we got until someone comes up and raises that issue that, hey, I can't do this because my existing commercial off-the-shelf tool only uses JSON, and what do I do about that? I just don't see enough pressure behind it right now to warrant it, I guess. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think we do have to be careful we're not solving a problem that doesn't necessarily exist at the moment, and wait for someone to actually bring that problem to us, because as David points out, by the time people get to the point of trying to use these events in their northbound systems, there may be better adoption of the Protobuf encoded binary at that time, and we may have made more reusable libraries available at that time. It would be really good to be able to hear from some northbound consumers as to whether they are having concerns now. Any more thoughts on the discussion?
I'm going to Amit, are you on, or Bjorn?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Do you have any comment regarding to this direction? Because I don't know what's the northbound. How do you guys take in the information from the VOLTHA regarding to the KPI and event?
Yeah, I don't have any comments so far. I have to discuss it internally, and then I come back later on that.
Okay, and then do we have anybody from Third Telecom and Netsia here? But I think, okay, so Scott, I think this is a very important issue, and then the northbound client or customer probably definitely need to be aware about this thing, right? Scott, so what do you think? What's the path forward? You're probably definitely interested in Netsia, AT&T, and Deutsche Telekom response on this one, right?
Yeah, I think so. So, I mean, maybe if we could just reach out to our contacts and query them over email and find out. I think the immediate thing we have to do is we have to make sure that the tool exists to be able to view this stuff, and that a library exists to be able to decode it.
Okay.
I do think it's a high bar to ask everybody, hey, we're spewing out this binary encoded protobuf thing, go write a library to decode it. So as long as we have documented and published our library for that, it at least gives people a starting point.
Yeah, and I just want to be careful. It's like, if people say I want specific use cases where they already are using it or planning to use it. We have to be careful about open-ended questions. Hey, would you like this feature? Who doesn't say yes to that, right? We've got to be careful when we're asking these questions. Is there an actual real use case today or in the next 6 months versus an open-ended question?
Yeah, I think we've heard a couple, right? And one is the VES northbound interface to ONAP, and I think AT&T had said that they also use JSON as well, right? I guess what's the trend, I guess. And I also understand a couple of other operators use JSON encoded format northbound as well.
Right, but with the VES,
I think I mean you could I think the key the key is whether it's human readable, whether it's JSON, whether it's XML, whether it's I mean I think the difference is between somewhat human readable or parsable by something versus binary, where you have to know the protobuf structure and everything, and so I think that's the main concern that I would have. I wouldn't. I mean, if JSON is picked, I'm fine with JSON, but it's the difference between something that could be human readable versus something that's binary encoded.
The implication being there, humans are actually reading it. Like in the VES example, it's not a human reading it. It's already custom code converting one event format to another. So if there's a library to read the binary structure, it wouldn't affect that.
I'm just imagining that there is possibly stuff that won't go to VES. I mean, I don't know that everything will go to VES. There may be other syslog type of things that start to come off the Kafka bus that may not go directly into VES. Or may go to other accumulation things that come off of Kafka. Yes, I agree the VES gets a translator. I agree with that part, but I don't know that everything's going to be VES that's coming off the Kafka bus.
So I did want to add one more use case, and that's anyone who implements the workflow functionality that we have in NEM. Currently this is in XOS, which of course is our own tool, and we can use whatever library we want to decode the events. But anyone who implements those workflows themselves will have to be watching for events, ONUs up and down and stuff like that, and processing them. So, this is both a monitoring that this impacts as well as workflow driver sort of things.
Right. Again, when I look at code, whether it's our code or the VES code or someone's writing code, right? They're using a library to decode a stream or a Kafka message. Yeah, a lot of languages have built-in libraries to do JSON, but you generate those libraries off the Proto-C stuff or the Protobuf stuff. So from code that there's control over, if you will, you're using a different library to look into the structure, right? And there's even ways to do that kind of using reflection or inspection if you wanted to be very generic about it. So the argument saying whether it's XOS, who's got Protobuf all over it as well, or at least was moving in some of those directions, or the VES, those arguments are harder for me to accept because I'm like, look, you're writing code already, use one library versus the other. When you talk about human readable, like that's a little different, but that's where kind of the tool chain you were looking at could come into play, because all of a sudden, yeah, if a human wants to monitor a stream during development, I absolutely get that. They're not going to be able to, on the fly, parse binary to a structure that they can use for debugging in their mind. So having a tool to see that stream would be useful, but that's also going to be true for, as I said earlier, to see the stream between the core and the adapter. As a developer, I'm going to want to see that. So having a tool to do that makes sense. I'm still, got to be honest, I'm struggling to see the use case where it absolutely makes sense to me that we have to do JSON in northbound. And again, if I'm in a minority, that's great. Well, it's not great, but it can be a fact. I don't see the overwhelming need right now. I hear a lot of, hey, it might be, or speculation, but I don't see the concrete use case in my mind that puts it over the edge.
I think the only thing that would put us over the edge would be a closed source tool that we would have to talk to, that neither we nor anyone else can update its input.
Right.
And I don't know that anyone has presented us with one of those yet.
And yeah, and then I'm going to go back to the point at this point. Then does it make sense if someone needs that to create that component that listens to the bus and publishes perhaps on a different topic, right? Listens to you know, the Kafka KPI events and publishes to Kafka KPI JSON, right? So that the clients that want JSON now have a JSON stream, right? Yeah, so I think unless anyone has a differing opinion, I'll write up a summary, which is that first we need to develop a tool that displays this as human readable. Second, we need to survey the northbound consumers and get their opinions on this. Thirdly, we can write this proxy to convert the binary encoded to plain ordinary JSON if there is ever a requirement that we just have to have plain ordinary JSON. Is that all? Maybe that's all.
Scott, how hard would it be to calculate how large each of some of these packets are? Like, for example, or like how big of some of the KPIs are and the frequency, and just so we can get an idea of the difference in size between a JSON and a gRPC message or a protobuf encoded message. Do we have anything that's equivalent that we could compare there? I guess so I feel like we don't have numbers, and that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think we could watch the output of Kafka Cat, pipe it into something, and take a look at what the size equivalencies are. You know, I don't know that we have right now that anyone has written up a list of what is every event and how frequently are they published. So, I mean, we would, I would think we could get a guesstimate of certainly the relative size differences of a JSON versus a protobuf version. And, you know, maybe based on looking at existing deployments, the distribution of stuff that comes out of it.
I mean, just another point, I guess. So on the existing protocols around publishing KPIs, PM data. So I mean, IPDR in the telco, in the cable world, and like IPFix in the telco world, and they both use an XML type encoding mechanism as well. So I guess there's going to have to be some kind of translation. If I want to use IPDR, I want to use IPFix, I'm going to have a translation function as well, right? So just saying, there's other human readable type formats that are kind of available in the northbound publishing world of things. So you know, it seems fairly common that non-binary type models are used in terms of publishing northbound data.
So it sounds like this proxy solution may be useful for those scenarios. Yeah. If we had a configurable proxy that it could output plain ordinary JSON, it could output XML, whatever needs to be consumed. I'm just thinking we do have the Kafka topic exporter, which I think people at Stairlight have kind of worked hard to generalize this as a proxy that could conceivably have multiple output plugins to output different formats. You know, perhaps that is a component that could become this proxy. It already listens to things on Kafka. It's going to need to understand these binary encoded things we're putting out there. And it has configurable output plugins, perhaps.
do we have a size of the volume of data that of events that will go on those buses?
Yeah, I don't think anyone, at least I don't think anyone here has those numbers handy. We would have to, as Zach suggests, we'd have to measure them.
Okay.
Any other comments? Okay, Scott. Oh, sorry, I lost my voice for 1 second. Do you have enough for the discussion today? And then we can continue to use VOLTHA to discuss for further dialogue as needed.
Yeah, I'll do an action item summary based on what we talked about today, and perhaps create some JIRA tickets. I think we've got everything we need to know, because at this point, we need to do a little bit of research to collect these numbers that people would like to.
Okay, if we need to schedule a follow-up discussion on one of the VOLTHA calls, let me know once we have the additional info, and then we can get that on the agenda.
Sounds good, we'll do.
All right, great. Thank you, everyone. So we do still have a little time left today because we did have to delay the demo until a future time. So any other topics that the group needs to bring up for discussion today? Okay, I'm not hearing any, so I think probably I can give you a little bit of time back. So next Tuesday, we'll be going over new JIRAs as usual, and then also have the demo from Scott. And then we have some future topics not slotted in yet to a specific time frame. Next week, we'll see if we're able to resolve the issues, the connectivity issues, so that we can have the Redfish importer demo. So that still will be tentative as I've slotted in until we have that resolved. And then I think next week also we'll try and firm up the agenda and the time slot for the community meetup in September in conjunction with ONF Connect. Okay, last call for topics before we drop the bridge today. Okay, thanks everyone for the discussion. I'll go ahead and stop the recording and we'll close today's meeting.